Hello, Becky. So lovely to meet you. You are a playwright who has written a play, Good for a Girl. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it's very much based on my own experience as a female footballer. Growing up, I played football kind of from the age of like 8 or 9. I was kicking a ball down the park with my dad and brothers from a very young age. And then Crystal Palace came into my primary school. I'm originally from South London, moved to Birmingham when I was sort of late teens. And yeah, Crystal Palace came into my primary school and were like, we're going to run girls only sessions. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Let's go along. And as part of that, I went along and played football at Selhurst Park as part of the Women's FA Cup final. And it was the first time I'd seen women play football. And I was just like, wow, this is actually something I could do. Like, I think before that, I don't think I'd ever seen a women's team. Like, it was never on TV back then. It was very inaccessible in terms of where they played. It was the first time I was like, oh, I could actually do this myself. So I started playing properly for teams across sort of South and Southeast London. Played in like some very high divisions, but back then it wasn't really something that could ever be my career. So I entered theatre at 18 years old, and haven't looked back. Like, love working in theatre, and now I get to write, which is amazing. But football's remained a massive part of my life, and I've always kept it kind of on the side. And now I've put the two together, which is really exciting. So it is very much based on my own experiences and interviewed loads of players. Some of those players now play for England, which is mad. Like, the research process began like 6, 7 years ago. And it's got to this amazing stage of women's football now since the Lionesses won at Wembley. I think it's suddenly become really like mainstream women's football, but there's still so many issues like in terms of inequality at the lower league levels and at the top levels as well. You still hear things about like women's football teams not having a change room anywhere near the pitch, for example, and things like that. And that kind of crops in up in the play, but it's also a lower league team that's battling against this sort of professional level and the challenges they face just being women, but also female footballers. So yeah.
What are you looking to try? What themes are you grappling with whilst you wrote this? Was there something specific that you wanted to deal with before, or is this something that came about through your interviews?
Yeah, I think sadly, like, I knew what was going to come up in those interviews and it came up again and again. So like I think I wanted to challenge. I think also like off the back of like I don't know, I think actually I began writing it off the back of Sarah Everard's murder, Sabrina Nessa's murder. And I think I was just angry and I was like, I want to challenge like the misogyny essentially in the UK. But the way that I can do that and can see that is particularly through football, that being my experience and my background. But yeah, some of the stories that crop up, I mean, are literally based on my real life experiences. Just simple things like there was never a sanitary bin in the toilet.
Oh my God.
Or we one year we got given a pitch, our women's team, that wasn't going to be the same as the men's pitch, and we were so excited we had our own pitch. But eventually it just became unplayable because there were rocks in the ground and we kept cutting our legs up every time we slide tackled. So it was that sort of thing that started to feed into it. And then the biggest stuff as well in terms of like um I mean, anyone that's watched the recent Spanish women's football documentary will know that there's massive issues with sexism and assault, even at like high levels of the game. And I think we don't often talk about what's going on at the lower levels. And some of the stories are quite hard hitting and quite hard to hear. But I think it does bring up a lot of that. And then also, like, how do you cope with injury? How do you cope with aging? It's the same across women's and men's football. Football's going to end for people one day in terms of the level that they can play at, and how do you move on from that? So I think it deals with some hard stuff, but also massively celebrates like women and their friendships and how they come together and how they sort of defy the odds a bit. So yeah, it's kind of a mishmash of all of that, really.
Are you hoping that it changes the perception of women's football? I'm not saying that your play is going to change everything. It'd be great, where you
Yeah.
just plant a seed of thought and suddenly somebody's like, you know what, I never thought about women's football like that, or I've never. And it's the bigger challenge. It's terrible. Men are at fault, whereby there isn't the respect there for women's football. I don't know whether I've put that too extreme, But is there an element of that where it's like you're not respecting women in terms of their football, the game they're playing, the sport they're playing, the backing that they get in, all those elements that come into it?
I think it's a really tricky one because I think a lot of it comes down to money at the moment. So I think like until there's more money and more investment, it's never going to be anywhere near the level of like the men's game. And men's teams will always prioritize their men's team and their academy boys teams over the women's because of the money and the sponsorship and audience. But I think, yeah, I think I really would love men to come and watch this play and be challenged. And I think there's brilliant male allies as well. I don't, yeah, I think someone once asked me a question of the of the back of this play, like, do you just hate men? And I was like, no, gosh, no. I've had some amazing male coaches. I grew up with all brothers. They're brilliant. They've always really like supported me. My dad's great. Like, do you know what I mean? It wasn't, but I think when you look at say like Alex Scott or like Leanne Sanderson, or like if you look at their social media posts, whenever they post anything about football, there's still like the comments about get back in the kitchen, or like there's so much like it's just disgusting. And you're like, I don't really understand. Like, I'd love those men to come and watch this play and just think about, oh, actually, what would it be like if my daughter played football? What would it be like if my niece or whoever it is, that female family member that like how could I actually support them and encourage them and grow the game rather than ridicule it? And I sometimes think as well, people just have perceptions of what the women's game is, and actually, if they watched it, I think they'd be quite challenged and probably, hopefully, quite enjoy it because it is football. It's not a different sport. So yeah.
And do you think that's where it is in that sense? For you, what do you want ideally? And the interesting thing that you just said there was that women's football is not a different sport; it's
Mm.
football. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes where people go, wait there, this is the women's game. What we need to do is we need to make it more marketable.
Mm.
So how can we make that more marketable? Does that mean there's more goals? The goals are bigger? Does that mean the pitches are smaller in terms of physicality or stamina? And I'm not saying that women haven't got the stamina. You know, some probably can outrun a
Mm.
lot of the men. But
Yeah.
physical wise, in terms of challenges and obviously and that's what I'm asking. Should the women's game be changed or should it be kept
No.
exactly the same as it is? Um, maybe what I'm kind of looking at is for me when I'm watching, I'm a football fan. I do watch football. I do watch men's football. I have watched some women's football, but for
Mm.
me, what I always want is I want to know who the best is at whatever they do. So, as an example, if I'm watching boxing, I'd watch a heavyweight division. I wouldn't watch a lightweight division because for me, I want to know who the best is in terms of what they do. And if there's somebody who's good enough to be in the heavyweight division, then I'll watch them. So, perhaps what I was looking at was say there was no classification of men and women. Do you
Mm.
think, and there was just a general team that if you're good enough, you could play in a men's side
Mm.
or not a men's side, but an
Yeah, yeah,
equal
yeah. No,
side.
I get what you're saying.
Do you think that could happen, or is
I think,
is that where the barriers suddenly arise and we suddenly go, oh wait,
yeah.
their games aren't the same. It's not the same. It's different.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a lot down to like male and female body types, and they are different, and like the physicality of a lot of women would struggle up against the physical, like just literally pure strength. Like I have played against men, and when a man tackles me, generally, not always, they tend to go in a bit harder, and it can I just think in terms of like probably the strength that I could build up compared to like a 6 foot man, I'm a 5'4" woman, is probably going to be quite different. So I think keeping it separate works. But I mean, there are players like, I don't know, Bunny Shaw is amazing. I think she could hold off a lot of defenders. There's certain players out there that you sort of look at and go, they've got amazing physical strength. Millie Bright, she is one strong woman, but I think keeping it separate works. I think you probably are looking at like a different style of football. I think it is the same game, but I think it's exciting in its own right, if that makes sense. I think like in terms of um Yeah, I think just in terms of like the goals you can get in the women's game, I think in terms of like the speed and pace is still great. It's just a slightly different game and it can become more technical because of that, I think. It's not just reliant on sort of like pure force.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do know what you mean. I think it's an interesting conversation and yeah, I think it's always one that's helpful to have. But I think to be honest, I think yeah, it's things like smaller goals I'm not really there for and smaller pitches, but some people like in the women's game will debate it. But I think it just makes things a bit more complicated. I think having it as the same sport is great, and I think keeping it as like women's and men's football does make sense in the same way that you have like the women's and men's 100 meters for different reasons. But yeah.
Definitely. Becky, coming back to you obviously writing this particular play itself. So what was your process? So you went
Yeah.
and you went and researched, you gathered conversations, and then from there, for any budding writers out there, you've now got obviously through your research, through writing it, it's now being shown at Birmingham Rep. What
Yeah.
was your whole process itself?
Yeah, gosh, yeah, it began began a long time ago. It actually began in COVID, when you sort of sit down and go, "Oh, I've actually got some time to write something that I really care about." So yeah, I began. I did like an Arts Council application. Arts Council funded the whole process, but we did an initial sort of research and development phase, where we interviewed lots of players. And then I sort of like did some work with some actors and our director Lucy Wilde in a rehearsal room, sort of looking at how do you show football on stage and how do you create that excitement and buzz of football on stage. It's really hard. And one thing I was really passionate about, that Lucy has kept in this version of the play, is seeing women playing football on stage, because I don't want to just cast actors. We've definitely cast actors who have a football background. And so like one of them's played for England youth teams, one of them's played semi-pro. And it's great having women on that stage who are able to sort of do some skills and kick a ball. And like, I mean, it's mad because if you watch them on the pitch, great. But then in the studio theatre, it's quite tricky what's achievable. But I think we've done an incredible job of creating, yeah, some really exciting, like the feel of football. And some of that is through literally having a ball, and some of it's through the movement language that Lucy's created. And yeah, so the writing process began sort of 6, 7 years ago, and we're now at a stage where I'm like, okay, cool, we're good to go. We're going on tour, which is great. So yeah.
So did the characters come first, or did you
Yes.
kind of have a theme that you were kind of looking at, or was it a case of look, there's these little stories here, there's another story here, there's another story here, and suddenly it's a case of how can we connect those stories, or there's a running theme that always seems to be connecting through these stories that you find obviously through your devising process.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the characters actually probably didn't come first. That's a good point. I think the stories were kind of there, but I think it definitely began as a story about one player and kind of her journey through the football club as a sort of late teens. Where's she going to go? What's her career going to be? And actually, it definitely then developed and then became about each player's journey and each player's story and how they came together, and also exploring like relationships within the club that sort of like that mentoring sisterly type sisterhood relationship. And then also like, I mean, women's football, having played for a lot of teams, a lot of players are in romantic relationships as well. So we see that on stage as well and see how that works within a team setting as well, which I've always, yeah, it's an interesting one. It's very different to the men's game in that perspective. Like,
Mm.
yeah.
I mean that's really interesting with what you've just said there in terms of relationships. Um, and bonding that people are having in men's football. It's something where there's still a lot of taboo, especially in terms of sexuality. If there's somebody who's coming out and they're saying that they're homosexual, you know,
Mm.
it's still in the media where it'd be like, oh my gosh, it's out there and the person's not treated very well, which is an absolute
Yeah,
disgrace.
yeah.
Whereas, would you say in women's football, it's almost kind of more accepted?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in the women's game it's not really an issue. And I think I'd say in general actually, like I went to watch Arsenal v Tottenham yesterday down at the Emirates, and it's just a much more inclusive environment. Like I think the fans as well, like you've got a lot of families coming to it, you've got a lot of children coming to it. There were loads of kids behind sitting behind me screaming the players' names, and I was like, oh, this is so different to when I go and watch like a
Men's
men's
football.
team play. So I think in general it's a much more inclusive environment, which is great. That is one massive positive you do see in the women's game, I think. And like people are just allowed to be themselves, which is great.
No. I know, which is lovely, which is what you want. You want everyone to be themselves.
Mm.
Um, do you've obviously got a vision in terms of you writing the play,
Yeah.
and director comes along, and obviously they've got a separate vision altogether. Do you get to be part of that rehearsal process where you're going, no, 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 that's not what I was thinking. That's totally against what I was thinking. I want it. Do you have those moments, or are you kind of the kind of person going, well, I've written it. If that's what you think, you're the director. That's fine.
No, to be fair, like Lucy and me have worked together a lot before, so I don't think we've really had any of those moments actually, which is amazing. But I'm in the space. I'm associate director on it, so Lucy's brilliant. Like she's quite regularly just checking in with me and going, "Does that feel real? Does that feel like when you used to play? Like is that kind of the experience?" And there have been certain things that come up that I'm like, oh, I didn't mean it like that, but that's better.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I kind of don't fully. I'm not fully on board with, I don't know, each their own, do your own thing, but directors, writers who direct their own work, because I do work as the theatre director, actually, that's probably more of what I do. But I think it's really hard to direct your own work because actually you're so involved in it and the pressure that puts on actors and the pressure that puts on the rehearsal room if you're like, I know exactly what this should be. And actually sometimes having a fresh pair of eyes on it and a different person's perspective on it is so helpful. And I think actually you can probably create better work that way. And we're both quite collaborative as well. So in the space, like we've been like the actors have contributed, everyone like our brilliant company stage managers been involved. Like there's it's definitely like we're trying to build that team vibe. It's not just one person at the top.
No, no, it's lovely. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have worked with April.
Oh,
So
cool. Yeah,
so
great.
we were both in a piece last year called Wild, which is due to tour later this year. Well, that weren't meant to be plugging it, but I've indirectly plugged
Oh,
it, which is
great.
different. No. Um, so for you, how did you manage to get your particular play into Birmingham Rep? Did they decide right off the off? Well, look, there's some funding. Obviously, you said talk about applying to the Arts Council, and you managed to get some funding, and they were part of that process, or did you kind of write your play and then suddenly say, hey, listen, new development, new work. This is something I've done. Can you back us?
Yeah, when I applied to the Arts Council, it was with the rep's involvement. So
Okay,
I said to the rep, I want to put this play on. I want to tell this story. I'm going to go to the Arts Council and apply for like quite a large bid. Are you up for me sort of naming you as our that, so we're in association with the rep and they've been giving us rehearsal space and that's that kind of
that's
thing like
nice.
in our production process, which is great. And we're a green book production as well, which is great. So it's like sort of trying to hit sustainability standards. And yeah, they've really supported that process as well. So yeah, that's kind of how we went about it, starting with the rep. And then as part of that process as well, we had other theatres interested who were like down as listed venues that we were going to go tour into if we get the money. But it is a little bit mad because you're kind of sitting on this like we've got this whole tour booked. Like you can't see because we're on radio. I'm doing like inverted commas. We had a tour booked, but we actually like hadn't you're not going on that tour until you find out that you've got the funding or not. And if you
Uh-huh.
don't get the funding, you're then emailing all your theatre venues going, "Oh, sorry, this isn't happening." So yeah, it's a weird way of doing things, but I mean, we were so chuffed to get the funding. I know it's a really hard
Mhm.
it's a hard application process and it's a hard place to be when you don't receive funding. So yeah, we were really happy
Nah,
to
I mean, congratulations on that. Is there
think,
is there any a backing by the Women's Football Association or the Football Association generally
yeah.
overall, where they're kind of going, look, you know what, we need to get this play out. We need to get it into grassroots level.
Mm,
Give other people an opportunity or them to be able to visualize, wait there, me as a young female, I can also get into sport. I can also get into football. I can keep myself fit. And it's not always about playing for the big sides, you know,
Yeah,
I was going to say Aston Villa. That's only because it's the team I support. Obviously, you coming
absolutely.
from Crystal Palace, you probably would have said Crystal Palace.
No, I'm not Palace. I'm not Palace.
We'll get onto that. What football team do you support? Yeah,
No, yeah, so we're working in partnership with a lot of places actually. Aston Villa Foundation have been great. So we've worked a lot with some of their girls groups, which has been brilliant. Derby County, sorry, I nearly Derby City them. Derby County are a brilliant partner as well, and we're working with one of their groups up when we go to Derby Theatre. And then their players are supporting our post-show Q&A. We've been working with Football Supporters Association, the
right.
FSA, and Fans for Diversity. They're kind of collabed, but they've been brilliant and sort of like they're going to be at our rep Q&A and sort of like hopefully pointing people in directions they can go in as a football fan. And then we've also been we've recently established a partnership with Her Game Too, which began as like a sort of female fans of men's football campaign, and now it's very much just women in football and women involved in football who want to be involved in football, and being able to sort of again point people in the right direction and show them where there's a place for them, which I think is great because obviously we're a piece of theatre and hoping to inspire, and then you want to be able to say off the back of that, oh, here's something you can do, or here's somewhere you can go, or if you want to play, this is what you can do. So yeah, we're hoping lots of these partnerships will enable audiences to do that, which would be great.
Oh, that is lovely. That's beautiful. So come on, look, I need to know what position did you used to play in?
I was a right back.
You was a right
I
back.
was a centre back when I was a kid because I was so tall, and then I never grew,
Yeah.
so I moved out right.
Were you running up and down that right wing?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I used to run 112.4.
Wow.
So I think my dad would always say like, "Oh, you weren't always the most solid defender. Sometimes they get round you, but then you're so quick you get back."
Yeah.
But yeah, I think yeah, right back. I've got a soft spot for a fullback. So yeah.
And come on then, which football team do you support?
Well, it's kind of like I love Villa. I haven't lived in Birmingham for sort of 18
You're
years or
just
whatever.
saying that. You're just saying that because you're
Nah,
here in Birmingham.
I go to Villa a bit. I
When
do
you're in
go.
London, yeah, I support Arsenal. Okay, Tottenham, Chelsea,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Liverpool. Or
I
when you're up north.
I had 2 weeks in year two supporting Aston Villa because I thought they were called Aston Vanilla and I like vanilla yogurt. But no, I actually grew up watching Charlton Athletic, which is very depressing. We were in the Premier League once upon a time. So that was my men's team, but they dropped their women's team. So I've
Oh
converted
gosh,
to Arsenal women.
yeah.
So Arsenal women have been my women's team for a very long time, but I can't say I don't support Charlton. I think like my family would kill me. But
Yeah.
no, that is them are teams.
No, no, that. Thank you. So, what the big question is,
Mm.
when is the play on? Because we need
Yes.
to know so people can
Yes.
come along and they can see it. And yeah,
Yeah. It's the 19th to 22nd of February in Birmingham at the Rep, and then it goes on tour to Malvern Theatres, Warwick Arts Centre, Attenborough Arts Centre in Leicester, and Derby Theatre. So it's a Midlands tour. So if you can't make the Rep, check out Good for a Girl One on Instagram has our tour dates at the top. So yeah, have a look at that. That'd be great.
no, that's great, Becky. I keep looking and seeing your name, which says Lucy, but obviously you're not
No,
Lucy, you're Becky because you're using somebody else's
sorry.
accent. So, but look, it's been lovely chatting to you, and I'm wishing you all the best with the play itself and everything involved with it. And what you're doing is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
No problems. I'm going to just pause.